Happy graduation to everyone. You have just finished an excellent program for both practical legal work in the many fields of specialization and for some of you in the academy. The LLM programs at Ghent have offered you a huge number of courses. I was personally delighted that so many of you wanted to take my course on the history of international law. That's a very appropriate thing to do, and of course, not least in Ghent. As you may know, there is a sense in which modern international law began at Ghent almost 150 years ago, more specifically on the 8th of September 1873, the moment of the establishment of the Institut de droit international, the Institute of International Law. The 15 men present, of course they were all men, present at the City Hall then declared themselves the conscience juridique du monde civilisé, the juridical conscience of civilized world. Of course, that expression is quite outdated. We no longer share the 19th century idea of the superiority of European civilization. Those of us who specialize in European law had better always bear that in mind. But the institute and the idea still exists, the idea of spreading liberal legislation across Europe and to seek to establish peaceful relations across the world. So there is a place for juridical conscience. I want to think a little bit about what that notion might mean. First of all, it's good to remember that although law is geared towards practice, and most of you will in due course be engaged in various kinds of legal practice, the law is also an academic discipline. It has, it's true, sometimes been doubted whether law is a science. To speak of legal science in English language sounds a little bit pompous, old-fashioned, maybe inappropriate even. In French, a science juridique, science de droit, seems appropriate, and of course in German, Rechtswissenschaft is the most natural of expressions. It's good to remember that law has had a place at the university since those universities were established in Europe in the 11th century and later on. At that time, together with theology and medicine, law was regarded as one of the higher faculties to which access was granted only once the study in the philosophy faculty had been already completed. To be a higher faculty meant, what it still means, that the study was designed for practical effect. Practical in the original Aristotelean sense of directed at human flourishing. Medicine was to bring about the flourishing of the body, theology, the flourishing of the human soul. Law, for its part, was meant to realize the happiness or the flourishing of the human community. Law is a science of the happiness of the human community. Like theology and medicine, law is both a craft and an intellectual reflection. As types of craft, higher faculties aim at practical intervention in human life, the life of the body, the life of the soul, and the life of the community. The medical doctor, the priest, and the judge. These are the experts whose craft is to contribute to human flourishing in practice. We meet them dressed up in white, black, or purple, the colors symbolically pointing beyond the single doctor, priest, or judge. Here, it points to the very system of the academy, the long periods of training, practical apprenticeship, and so on. The experts' dress and other formalities, the complex liturgy of the church, the architecture surrounding these practical operators remind us that behind the craft itself, there are centuries of intellectual work at institutions that we call universities, like the University of Ghent. Universitas is a community of students and teachers, and not, for example, of financial consultants or managing directors. What unites the community is its orientation to human flourishing. This is the intellectual assignment, the point of the craftsmanship that ultimately also the LLM programs at Ghent Law School aspire to. Flourishing of the body, the soul, and community. Legal academics study the human being as a member of their different communities. There is the family, and family law is not just about marriage and succession. It's also about reflection of partnership, just relations between parents and children, and among the children themselves. And then there is the polis, the state community. Constitutional law reminds us that to be a citizen of a state is not just to be a cog in an administrative machine or the recipient of whatever benefits the state can provide, but it is the privilege to work with one's peers for the good life that can only be realized in community and together. And then finally, there's the international community. I'm a professor of international law. How could I forget that? Many of you are there in Ghent, specifically orienting to practices that have an international or even a global ambition. What might flourishing mean in those contexts? Last year, a report was released by Oxfam, according to which the world's 2,153 billionaires have more wealth than the 4.6 billion people who make up 60% of the world population. The 22 richest men in the world have more wealth than all African women put together. Of the wealth generated in 1 year, namely 2018, 82% of that wealth went to the richest 1%. That's not the image of a flourishing global community. If law were medicine, we would say that the community is sick. If law were theology, we would say it's lost its soul. As lawyers, those numbers compel us to recognize the extreme injustice of the world. But it also provides universities and faculties with a mission to cure the world, to repair its soul. Therefore, dear graduates, law is an academic discipline. It's not just about managing bureaucratic processes or deciding even less winning cases. It is to reflect upon the ideal futures that contrast with those present numbers, the present practice. What would it be for a global community to flourish? It is to answer that question that law has a rightful place in the academy. Equality and justice are large and abstract words, easily misunderstood and misused. Therefore, we receive the high-level education that we do receive in places like Ghent. That education is a privilege. And having that privilege, even though to say this is a cliche, to having that privilege comes with a responsibility. There is much to do in practice in order to make the world a better, a more just place. That is the purpose for which we have received our education, for which you receive your master's degrees. I wish you best of luck in fulfilling those ambitions, and congratulations once more.